Hey, welcome back to another economics video. Today we're going to look at level 2 inflation paper from 2024, so that's 91222 from 2024, and we're going to go through each question. We're going to talk about some structures to answer the question, some ideas, some keywords, and hopefully we'll get a better idea of how to walk through and tackle this exam if a similar one comes up this year. So we'll start with question 1, causes of inflation, and I can straight away see that there's this ADAS diagram, which is ideal. This is something that comes up every year, so we'll be happy if it came up again this year, so we know, because we know what we'll be doing. So let's think about ADAS. We're going to go straight into thinking about the two components and how they work with AD and AS. So they're just going to keep these ideas in the back of our mind as we read through the first paragraph. Causes of inflation. The return of the annual 4-day field days event in Hamilton will have a positive financial effect or impact for New Zealand, and more specifically the wider Waikato region. An economic impact report has highlighted some of these benefits, such as approximately $250 million of spending generated for the New Zealand economy and 2,000 full-year jobs needed to facilitate the event. In previous years, the event has attracted international visitors from over 50 countries and is expected to continue to attracting these overseas visitors. On graph 1 below, show the impact on aggregate demand of the field days event being held in the Waikato in 2020. So let's get to drawing, and you can see I've highlighted a few sections up here. $250 million of spending that can be put down to either consumer spending increasing, or maybe you could have a case for saying investment spending. I'm going to just leave it as consumer spending. And then the second one is export receipts increasing because international visitors from over 50 countries are coming. And of course, when they come into New Zealand and purchase goods and services, we treat that as exporting goods to those, or services to those countries. So those two increase, leading to an increase in aggregate demand. So we're going to shift our AD curve out like this, and we're going to enter a new price level. And of course, you'll do dotted lines and a new Y. So we're going to go Y1 and PL1. And we're going to draw arrows up and arrow across. And then arrow showing the shift here. So there's an increase in AD to the right. And then we're going to label that as well, of course, AD1. Perfect. So that's question 1A. 1B. Explain the impact of inflation of the field days event being held in the Waikato region. So for this one, we're going to look at taking the 4 C's approach: cause, component, curve, and consequence. And we're going to get the cause straight out of that context. So let's paste my answer in here and we can go over it. So the cause. So the cause is going to be the $250 million spent and the 2,000 full-year jobs. So those are going to combine to lead to an increase in C later on. And then the 50 visitors from overseas, or overseas visitors, is going to be the second one. So there's going to be increase in spending and an increase in tourism or overseas visitors. Then component, so we link that cause to a component of aggregate demand. So increased spending is C, consumer spending, use the whole term there. And increased spending from visitors overseas is export receipts. So we're going to use the whole term there as well, export receipts. Then we talk about the curve. So because C and X are components of AD, and we can put the whole equation in here. In fact, right now I'm going to do that. AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus. A rise in both leads to AD shifting to the right from AD to AD1. Then the consequence. This will increase the price level from PL to PL1, representing inflation. The reason why we're using that as our final sentence is because in the question it says explain the impact on inflation. So we want to get back down to inflation here at the end by talking about the change in the price level. Perfect. Let's move on to question 2. Cyclone Gabriel was New Zealand's costliest non-earthquake related natural disaster. Hawke's Bay apple growers account for approximately 70% of New Zealand's 900 million apple export trade. The cyclone destroyed 25% of these crops. There has been damage to key farming infrastructure that will come at significant cost to the farmers to repair. There was significant damage to orchards and farms, which is expected to see the loss of the primary sector beyond 2023. Beyond these localised impacts, primary sector businesses across the country are reporting increases in their insurance costs as a result of numerous severe weather events across the country since 2023. On graph 1 below, show the impact on aggregate supply of the Cyclone Gabriel and the higher production insurance costs for New Zealand businesses. So if there's going to be an increase, in fact, let's scroll up and take our quote straight from here, or not, our structure, and of course we're talking about AS here, so I'm just going to delete this AD part. And so we're saying cost of production rises, so that's that first part here, COP, it stands for cost of production, and it's increasing, which is going to mean that our AS falls or decreases as goods get more expensive to produce. So to draw that, we'll just draw a nice purple one here and draw the AS shifting there, and then AS1, and then of course again we need our new price level, so we're going to draw PL there, Y there. I'm just drawing it quite rough, you guys will have to draw it with a straight line and a ruler and dotted lines and make sure it's perfect in the exam. So price level has increased, whereas output in this case has decreased, and then this will be our final outcome. So let's look at the D, the explain part. Explain the impact on inflation of Cyclone Gabriel and the higher production and insurance costs for New Zealand businesses. Again, we're going to go with our 4C model for the response. So let me just paste my answer from over here, copy and paste, and we're going to go cause the increasing cost of insurance for nationwide for businesses. So straight from the context, business prices, business insurance is going up price. Component, therefore cost of production will rise for businesses. Curve, in order, with one R, to maintain profit, businesses will increase price. This is shown on the graph as a shift left in aggregate supply from AS to AS1. Consequence, this will increase the price level from PL to PL1, representing inflation. Again, just a little reference to inflation there, as the question asks to talk about inflation, and it's talking about the higher production and insurance costs for New Zealand businesses. So cause, component, curve, consequence on inflation. And then D, this is where our excellence section comes in. Again, for excellence, we kind of lose our structure a bit because the questions can be quite different each year. You need to be able to adapt. There's no spelling out the way the excellence, it's tough. So discuss whether field days or Cyclone Gabriel is likely to have a more significant impact on New Zealand's inflation rate. Refer to graph 1 and graph 2. So when we think about bigger or greater than, we want to think about the size of the shifts, number of industries affected, number of regions affected, size of the population affected, if it's a once-off or if it's a reoccurring or long-term effect. So let me take my answer from this page and paste it in. So Cyclone Gabriel is likely to have the larger impact on the overall price level compared to field days events. We're using compared to make sure we're discussing the two. Field days is a localized event that will only increase spending in the Waikato region and only occurs over one weekend, so short run and one region. Whereas Cyclone Gabriel was also localized to only one region, but increasing insurance costs are going to be across many regions, and in fact across the entire country. Therefore, the decrease in AS is going to be larger than the increase in AD. There will be a larger impact on inflation. So we're going to say that because it's more regions and for a longer period of time, the Cyclone Gabriel is going to have the bigger effect. The increase in price level on PL1 on graph 2 will be larger than the increase in price level to PL1 on graph 1. And we're saying that because we need to make sure that we refer to the graph up here when it says refer to graphs 1 and 2 in our answer. We cannot just say as shown on the graph, we have to put it into a full sentence. Okay, let's look at question 2. Identify and mark with an X the point on the model 1 that best represents a recession. And so we know that this is going to be our growth stage. Up top is going to be the boom or the peak. Then we move down into this recession where we get the negative growth, down to a depression or a trough, and then back up to growth again. I'm going to put my X down here at the bottom of the recession just to make sure that I'm talking about the part where it's in the negative economic growth here. But any point on this slope would be sufficient for a recession. State the components of the quantity theory of money. We should be very comfortable with this when it comes to the exam. So we've got from money supply. We've been given V here, velocity of circulation, but again, important that we know it's for velocity of circulation, not just velocity. P for price level. This is going to be the outcome of the question. So we're going to finish on price level when we talk about QTOM or quantity theory of money. And then Q is for the output. And I like to just put a little dash, real GDP, because that is the measure of output we're going to use in our exam. Explain why the velocity of circulation is likely to decrease during a recession. So we're going to start with a definition, because we can easily put a definition of recession in here just to help fill out our answer and demonstrate our understanding. And then we're going to talk about why it's going to decrease. So obviously it's going to be during a recession, there's uncertainty, high unemployment, therefore low consumer confidence and low spending, and perhaps low business confidence, and therefore low investment as well. So those two will combine to lead to a lower velocity of circulation. So in here we've got recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. This means is a great way to just expand your answer. If you're looking for that next line, consumer and business confidence will lower as the uncertainty about the future income increases. This means consumers will save more and spend less as they prepare for the future, leading to a decrease in the velocity of circulation. So I've got the idea of just saving more and spending a bit less because we're nervous about what's going to happen because it's a recession, high unemployment, and low growth. Assuming all other variables remain constant, use the quantity theory of money to explain how a decrease in the velocity of circulation will impact inflation. So of course, MV equals PQ. The first thing we're going to do is state the theory. The quantity theory of money states MV equals PQ. We want to explicitly state that. Then we want to say assuming and Q remain constant. So we want to state our constants. State the theory, state the constants, then tell me what's changing. A fall in the velocity of the circulation will lead to a fall in the price level. This is because, so price level is the last step, and I'm saying why. This is because a decrease in one side of the equation must be balanced by a proportional, that's a key word, proportional, decrease in the other side in order for MV to equals PQ to remain balanced. Therefore, a fall in V must result in a fall in the price level. Then you can have one more sentence there to say this causes negative inflationary pressure, or something about inflation falling, because you want to make sure that you're talking about the impact on inflation, but definitely price levels where you want to end up at the end of this sentence. Let's keep going to part E. Some experts argue that the New Zealand economy could experience a recession across the next 2 years with a significant increase in output predicted. Use the quantity theory of money and the business cycle to explain how a recession may impact overall inflation. In your answer, include why real output may decrease during a recession, how the change in velocity of circulation as well as real output will impact the price level in the economy. So we're going to answer the bullet points as two kind of separate answers with just keeping each other in mind. So we'll start with the first one, why real output may decrease during a recession. Real output may decrease during a recession because during a recession, consumer spending is low. This means fewer goods and services need to be produced to be sold to the consumers during this time. Pretty good answer. That's one reason. There might be another reason. You might want to say something about unemployment decreasing, or talking about the definition of recession there if you like, but that would be sufficient. And then we'll make this a bit larger for us to read, even one more than that. Assuming it remains constant, the decrease in the velocity and decrease in velocity and a decrease in the real GDP should offset each other, resulting in no change in the price level. A recession causes a fall in the velocity of circulation, and a recession will result in a fall in real output. Therefore, both changing variables are on the opposite sides of the equation. A proportional fall will keep the equation, and both will keep the equation balanced, and the price level will remain the same. If one side has a more than proportional change, e.g. velocity changes by 5%, but output only changes by 2, or by 1, then the price level will change to keep the equation balanced. In the example, this would mean PL decreasing by 4%. So what we're saying is that the two sides are balanced, both see a fall, then they remain the same. If the two sides are balanced and one sees a big fall and one sees a little fall, the price level will have to decrease more to make them equal the same. Let's look at question 3. Cool, let's get into question 3. Impacts of inflation. Again, a typical question that's going to come up, asking us about how it's going to affect different groups in different ways. So New Zealand's annual inflation rate in 2023 was 4.7%. This decreased from the annual rate in 2022 when it was 7.2%. Define inflation. So I've already got my answer written down here. Hang on, just covered up a bit by this. Inflation is an increase in the general price level of a nation's economy. So inflation is an increase in the general price level of a nation's economy. The concepts here, general price level, you need to have general or average in there. and then increasing in prices. Go on to question B. Explain whether workers on the minimum wage would prefer a lower or a higher inflation rate. We said here workers earning the minimum wage would prefer a lower inflation rate. This is because low-income workers are spending the majority of their income on goods and services like necessities. A low inflation rate means their purchasing power remains and they are able to afford the same amount of goods and services. When inflation is high, they may need to decrease the amount of goods and services they purchase or switch to inferior goods that are cheaper. This will lower their standard of living. So the reason why these guys are the worst off is because they've got little room to increase their wage because they're probably low-skilled earners. So little opportunity to increase their wage. So it's very hard to increase their purchasing power. So a low inflation rate means they can at least purchase the same amount of goods that they could before, or a similar amount. And then C, explain whether savers would prefer a low or a high inflation rate. Savers would also prefer low inflation rates. This is because they maintain the purchasing power of their savings. This means they can purchase a similar amount of goods and services as when they spend the savings as they could when they earned the income for the savings. So if you earn 10 grand this week and you can buy a car this week, you hope that by the time that you spend your savings that you can still buy a car or a similar amount of goods as you could when you first earned the money. On the other hand, high inflation rate will reduce the purchasing power and mean they will be able to buy less goods and services now than they could when the income was earned. So in the car example, it would be like earning $10,000 and instead of buying an old car at $10,000, then waiting a few years and then trying to buy a car and finding out you can't purchase any car for $10,000. Part D. New Zealand's annual inflation rate of 4.7% in 2023 was higher than all of our major trading partners. Annual inflation was 4% in the United Kingdom and 3.1% across the European Union. Compare and contrast the impact of New Zealand's higher inflation rate on New Zealand importers and exporters to the United Kingdom and European Union. For me, it was a bit tricky, this question. I kind of went to put my head in trade mode, but you have to keep your head in inflation mode here and say the impacts of inflation on your prices as a producer. So exporting businesses are the worst off during times of inflation. This is because businesses are paying higher costs to produce their goods and services due to inflation. So for example, their wage bill is going to be increasing during a time of inflation, therefore increasing the prices of their products, therefore becoming less price competitive in overseas markets. Goods being exported to the UK and EU will seem more expensive due to the inflation rate of 4.7%. In fact, they will just be more expensive for overseas purchasers, and their local producers will still be able to produce for the same price as before. Export volumes will likely be lower and lead to fewer export receipts for these businesses, and businesses will decrease production to remain profitable. On the other hand, importing businesses are positively impacted during times of inflation as they are able to import their goods and services from countries at a lower price, where inflation rates are lower than 4.7. They can then price their products at more competitively in New Zealand market while maintaining profit margins. So that's saying if New Zealand prices are rising because of inflation, importers can purchase from overseas, bring in their products for a cheaper price, and then sell that to maximize their profits. They may even increase their supply in order to maximize profits. Again, this does kind of leave out the idea of the foreign exchange market reducing the price as inflation increases, or the value of the NZ dollar decreasing due to inflation. But if we just think about it from an inflation perspective, then that's how we make it make sense. That's all. If you've got any other questions, or if you'd like another help in another exam, just let me know in the comments or flick me an email. Thank you.